Hello and welcome to the second series of Into the Black Archive. We're making progress. Slowly, but surely.
I bet you didn't thought we'd make it this far.
Yeah, but all the bets against us not making it this far, it's proven wrong now. But anyway, it's not just me. Actually, you can hear there's someone else in the background. Who could it be? Well, it's none other than James Stevenson.
People of wherever you get your podcasts, you may be disappointed again. I'm back.
Mostly Apple Podcasts, surprisingly.
Mostly Apple Podcasts, yeah. So they love us. They love us at Apple.
Yeah, after it took them a month to let us on there.
Don't worry about that. We are fond of Apple for what they have given us. I'd also like to make a big shout out to the state of Ohio, wherever you are. We love you.
So this episode, we are looking at Planet of Giants. It was a three-parter, and a lot happens.
A lot?
But we'll go into that later. So, as we did with Edge of Destruction, when I realised this episode's probably going to be a little bit on the short side, I've listened to some more Doctor Who audiobooks.
Oh, have you? Are we going to get little? We going to get like a little segment, like Owen's audio reviews out of this? Oh, we are.
Well, if every time we have short episodes, I'm going to try to at least. So I've attempting to listen to the SCRATCHMAN. SCRATCHMAN.
The SCRATCHMAN.
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 SCRATCHMAN. Have you heard about
SCRATCHMAN, or is it the SCRATCHMEN?
Mun. That's how they pronounce it.
SCRATCHMAN.
Yes.
Okay, and no, I haven't heard of it. Which Doctor is it?
It is Tom Baker's Doctor.
Well, it's Tom Baker's Doctor.
Written
Very nice.
by Tom Baker.
Oh.
It's
and can Tom Baker write for himself?
I think I'm going to be crucified for this. No.
You don't like it? No?
No. I don't like it. I don't know. I can't get into it. I've listened to an hour of it now, and I'm struggling. So I'm listening to the audiobook of the book. So yeah.
What do you think's holding you back from getting into it? Is there anything particular?
I think it's one thing in particular which I'm going to ask you about.
Okay.
So you're a screenwriter. How much are you into books?
I do like a book. I don't read as much as I should, but I do like reading a lot. What
do you feel about third-person writing versus first-person writing?
That's a really good question, actually. Personally, I think it depends on what story you're trying to tell, and it's to do with the flow of information in your narrative for me. Mm-hmm. So if you're writing in first person, then the key is being able, I think, to hide information, or you go from the perspective where you know less than other characters. Mm. When it's third person, I think where you place the audience is more that you know more than the lead character, and so you approach it from a different way. And they both work, but it depends on what story you're telling. Like, for example, I'll try and keep this quick. Mm-hmm. In a first-person story, you'll be shocked by the revelation that their partner is cheating on them. Yeah. For example. But in a third-person story, you can do the flip and show the other person doing the adultery, and then you know more than the character, so you're dreading that scene rather than you get shocked when the scene happens. So they both work. It's just a different approach, and it depends on what story you tell. Yeah. So why do you bring this up in relation to Tom Baker writing a audio drama? So
I don't overly like first-person stuff, and this is written first-person.
First-person audio drama is...
It's not an audio drama, it's an audio book.
Oh, it is an audio book?
Yeah,
sorry.
It's a book.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to write first-person without it sounding really mawkish.
The basis of the story, which I've gathered so far, I'm only an hour in, so I'm not actually going to be spoiling much here. We first get introduced to Tom Baker's Doctor as he's brought into a council of Time Lords, being held in sort of like a judge and jury kind of situation.
Yeah, whole courtroom drama situation.
Yeah, and then he's regaling the story to them.
What, in the first person?
Yeah.
Oh my.
But then it then gets really weird because he then starts speaking about things which he wouldn't be there for.
Well, is it made clear when he talks about them that he might have heard about that happening from somebody?
It's done in a very... what's the best way to put this? It's done in the easiest way, the most cheaty feeling way possible. So his argument is essentially, we're Time Lords, we can go and look through the history logs.
That ain't it. That ain't first person experience. You might as well be doing third person if you go through history logs. That's the idea of it.
That is where I think the issue becomes. It isn't just that it's first person. It's trying to be all things to all men. And it just doesn't overly work for me.
Do you know what that reminds me of from a movie perspective? And I think you'll kind of chime with this. You know, in like a comic book movie or a fantasy movie where there's a young protagonist who isn't ready to take up the mantle yet, and their mentor or their parent will tell them like an ancient story of the culture, which will become relevant later. Because it's like, you know, long ago, there was... The one I think of is the one in the first Wonder Woman movie where they're like, long ago, the gods ruled the earth and the people were happy, and then Ares came about and brought war and famine and all that. And that's always really cheap, in my view, because all they do, it's basically just an excuse to do a nice animated sequence.
Yeah. So I think an area which demonstrates my issue with it well is this scene here. This little bit of spoilery stuff if you care about it under an hour in. But essentially, I think it's Harry. Harry goes into a barn. The bad guys come in. He starts retreating towards the back of the barn. And then suddenly, without the Doctor being there at this point, and then suddenly the Doctor's scarf appears out of nowhere. He goes, Henry didn't think a scarf could come out of nowhere. So he looked up, and it was me.
A scarf dropped down in front of him. For a brief moment, Harry stared at it, doing his best boggle. Scarves did not, as a rule, just dangle down out of thin air. Psst! He looked up. Above him was a trapdoor, leading into the hayloft. Leaning over him were Sarah and me.
And they're going... And then it kind of...
I'm not a fan of that at all.
And I'm just like going, this...
It sounds like a kid's book, the way that's written.
And like, I can understand where he's coming from. But
yeah, what I think Tom is doing, from a writer perspective, is that he's confusing where the first person and the third person actually overlap. Because they don't overlap.
Yeah. So I think that's one problem. And also... You know how the Doctor will normally go out and start spouting out scientific, let's be honest, it's rubbish because it's a TV show, scientific rubbish to try to keep the viewers hooked. He's doing this in his thought process as well. I'm sort of going, this, you can do this.
So it's all internal monologue?
So there's a little bit of internal monologuing. And like, I feel like the Doctor can get away with saying things like this, but getting him to think those sorts of things just don't really work for me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cheating going on in there, and there's a lot of fusing of different writing techniques that aren't being done very cleanly. I mean, personally, I think internal monologue is really cheap. You can get away with it in a book because you have the freedom then to go inside somebody's head and get a picture from that, but I do think it's cheap in terms of doing character, especially when you write a script where your only rule for doing character really is just showing what they do. You can't even say how they feel. Like if I wanted to say that my main character feels sad, I can't do that. I have to say that she's frowning or she's wiping a tear off her cheek or you know, some little giveaway that I give her at the start of the script that comes out in the end, like she plays with her shirt cuffs and bites them.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I feel like he could have gotten away with it here if it wasn't for those Megalyn kids. No, I mean, if...
Hold on.
He could have gotten... I think he could have gotten away with it because it's for first person thing. And I think with first person in the monologuing, you can completely get through with it.
You're allowed to do that. That's fine.
I feel like it just doesn't seem like a natural thought process to be going through in your head.
Yeah, so it doesn't really feel natural at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, this is why you should always, certainly when you're doing something prose, is to be very, very clear about what the voice is from the start, because if you start getting confused about where your voice is coming from, the whole thing's a mess, regardless of how good everything was before. It is vital, it's pivotal.
But I'll see if I can get through an hour of it, and I think we've got this two-parter after Daleks, so we can come back and see if I've managed to get through any more.
We'll have a little update in 2 weeks.
Yes. But anyway, back on to the Planet of Giants.
Yes, back to 1964. Well, the good news is we're back on Earth for the first time since we left, which is great, and we seem to be in the present day.
Yes.
But not everything as it seems.
Shall I go through our synopsis?
Of course, Owen. And as quickly as you can, hopefully out of breath.
Cool. And maybe a laugh at him halfway through. The Doctor and TARDIS team are in the TARDIS. Suddenly the TARDIS doors open. But remember last time when the TARDIS doors open and nothing happened. But this time, something did happen. But we'll find out later. So, the TARDIS lands. Actually, no, the scanner breaks first because something inside it must be a little bit too big to display, which isn't how television technology works, but we can skip over that.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So they land, and everything seems a little bit weird. Like there's concrete to hold small bits of rock, and there's very large animals. And then it becomes clear they've all shrunk, and then they have to try to solve a murder mystery while shrunk, and then they don't really do anything to end the story close. And then that's about it. Then they get grown back again. If you can't tell by this synopsis, I'm not impressed by this episode.
This one is what we just needed to put one out. It's not a great start to the series at all. And I think, yeah.
What I would say is if it was an episode 4 or an episode 5, I would say this is harmless filler. But as you were saying, it's the first episode.
It's such a strange one. I mean, really, it doesn't feel like a season opener because, in a sense, there's a continuation. Well, actually, I say there's continuation in the sense, right? But there's meant to be another burnt episode after that. Is there? Never know.
Yeah.
But they arrive. Everything seems like the typical. We're on a planet. Oh, this is weird. And then it quickly becomes clear that the objects aren't big; they're just small. That's like a perfectly fine start to the episode, and I'm happy with that as a concept. Yeah, it's a bit cliche, but if you do something cool with it, then yeah, why not? It can be quite fun. They just don't do anything cool with it.
Yeah, I don't feel like much really happens in the episode.
It's like, do you know what my main problem with it is? I'll go straight in with what my main problem with all 3 episodes is that essentially there are 2 not very interesting stories that don't connect at all.
Yes.
They just kind of happen around each other. It's so strange.
Yeah, it feels like if the Doctor and team wasn't there, what played out with the giant humans, who, as I say, there's a murder issue going on, it feels like it would have ended up, yes, slightly differently towards the end they caused an explosion, but it feels like it would have played out the exact same way anyway. It
would have. I could think back and thinking, in what ways did the Doctor and the team actually affect the narrative? And they just never do. They never affect the narrative. You've got this whole different story going on involving a science experiment, murder, and a whole drama about shady people not really saying what they are and what their real motives are.
Shall I say what
it's not connected?
For synopsis of the second story is, because I essentially did synopsis of the first story. So let's quickly explain what happened in this second story, which we're on about. So a new chemical has been made to try to... An insecticide, am I getting the right word? I think I am.
It's basically a very powerful insecticide.
Yeah, it's called ND6.
No, it's not. It's called DN6.
DN6. I've even got that written in front of me.
We had a conversation about this, listeners, before we started as to what the name was, and I got it wrong about 5 times.
So we initially get introduced to a guy called Farrow, who is a scientist who's very much against the DN6. And then we get a businessman, Forrester, who's very passionate about wanting to get this through because he will lose loads of money if it doesn't. Farrow goes, I'm not letting you put this through. Forrester kills him. And then Smithers comes along and goes, oh, look, he's died. And Forrester makes up some excuse. Smithers goes, come on, mate, this is clearly murder. Forrester doesn't really say why he killed him, but they kind of just go along with it. They have a fight towards the end when Smithers realises why Farrow got killed. And then the police turn up, and that's the end of that.
That is it, folks. It is that strange, because it's not really a narrative. It's like, it's very, very basic as a story, 3 characters, one is killed, then there's a little bit of a cat and mouse game going on, but it's not really a cat and mouse game, because Forrester never really does anything to convince him otherwise that he hasn't just murdered a man on his drive.
The issue which I have with being critical of this episode, of saying anything useful about this episode, is that it just goes along. There's nothing offensive about it, but there's also nothing which stands out as being good.
Now, I'm going to try and say things that are good about the episode.
Okay.
Because there are a few things, but they're really just like suggestions and ideas.
Yeah.
The cliffhanger of the second episode is actually quite good.
Yes, so that's when the Doctor and Susan are hiding inside of a sink plug as
they're tiny.
As the water goes into it.
Yeah, because is it? Oh goodness me! Is it no, it's not Farrow. He's dead. Is it Smithers that's using the sink?
Yes, he is, because he's just
because he's washing his hands of the DN6.
Yeah,
and to get into the house that they're in, the Doctor and Susan have climbed up this drain pipe.
Yeah.
Which has been... there's quite a clever explanation for it, saying that because of the DN6 going down it corroded the material inside it to create lumps and crags and things like that that they could use to climb, which is actually really inventive.
So they had to go into this house as well, because this is where Ian and Barbara had ended up after hiding in a briefcase. They got carried off into this, essentially this lab, this small shed, which is a lab.
Yeah. Which is usually the structure for all these Doctor Who serials. It's people make dumb decision, get taken off somewhere, and then we spend about 2 hours trying to find them.
The issue with this
failing every turn.
The issue with this dumb decision is that it's so easily predicted, because it happens to Ian directly beforehand.
Yeah, and then it happens just again, but with Barbara.
Yeah, because he goes, oh look, it's a matchbox,
isn't it? Yeah.
He goes inside of it, man comes up, picks it up, takes it off.
Yeah, completely foreshadowed, and then it happens again literally 5 minutes later.
Yeah, you were saying you want to be good about, say some nice things about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to be good about it, because that cliffhanger was inventive. They have fun with all of the big props, and I think it's visually nice, and they have a bit of fun with that.
Yeah. I think the props team had fun making of those
the props
small
team
things big.
Is the ones you want to look at, because they had to make a great big insect, the big matchbox,
actually,
all those kinds of things.
One thing I did like about it was that one robot fly, which they had on screen for like 10 seconds. That was very good. And also, I think there's an element of using the... I don't think if they hadn't had the insecticide, I don't think this story would have worked, because they would have had to have an excuse for the animals not moving, or having to make loads of small animals move.
Yeah, it's from a logistics perspective, it's clever because it makes it easy for the prop department to go, oh, they're all dead because of great big powerful pesticide.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And they do create a bit of tension with the pesticide involving Barbara, which I'm presuming we'll get to very soon. Although there are issues with that, which is mainly to do with the other story that doesn't involve men in coats.
Yeah. So, another thing as well about this episode, you know how it's relatively slow? As we're saying, nothing really happens. How would you feel about if it was a 4-parter?
That's my thoughts on that.
Because that's what it initially was.
Jesus Christ.
It was scripted and planned to be a 4-parter, and they got told they had to cut it down to 3. That's why it's such an odd size compared to all the other even numbers.
Who was the saviour, the hero who came in with that edit note?
I was reading about it earlier. Give me one.
Tell me it's Verity.
No, it wasn't Verity.
Oh.
Donald Wilson, BBC head of serials.
BBC head of serials. Donald Wilson, we salute you. Imagine if that had been 4 parts. Like 3 parts of that makes you want to like fall asleep and forget about it. 4 parts, I think you're genuinely considering like violence.
Yeah, apparently he felt that the story simply didn't work in 4 parts. The third was entitled Crisis, like the last one currently is, and the fourth one was going to be called Urge to Live. In the end, it kept the original title, but the credits had to be changed. There's no recordings of the original layout.
Yeah, 4 parts would have been way, way too long for this because the narratives do not sync up.
Yeah.
But anyway, I want to chat about the characters again. I want to check in
with
how everyone's doing in season 2, because we haven't talked about that.
We haven't talked about characters yet. We just went straight into how
we
annoying
went straight
and bad
into
it was.
We went straight into the complaints. Shall we? Shall we check in? Because we've had a whole series now with our 4, and they're still all here. How is everybody doing? Starting with Will Owen.
Can I be completely honest with you?
Yeah, go on.
I don't think this has changed anything from what we said in the last episode.
Absolutely not.
Will Hartnell's still grumpy, but he's got a little shine in his eye. Ian is the best. He's the most compassionate and all that stuff. Barbara is weak in some areas, but getting better. Susan screams.
Susan has another real screamy moment in this one.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge one. What was it? It's when Ian gets taken in the matchbox, isn't it? And she's just like,
yes,
and Ian is gone. And like Barbara has to like hug her as if she's just trying to shut her up.
And also when she initially sees the rather big tiny insect.
Oh yeah, basically, I really feel for Carol, honestly, as an actor, because she must turn up to work in 1964 and just go, how am I screaming this time? Because that's all they get her to do.
I think, as I said in the end of season review 2 weeks ago, you can see why she felt she needed to go, because it just isn't that much of an interesting character. Well, not as interesting as it could have been.
Nowhere near, because they just can't figure out how to write her, or if they could figure out how to write her, there's something stopping them, i.e., BBC thoughts or focus grouping, or even conservative values of the time, perhaps.
Yeah.
Stopping writing that character more boldly. And the issue, like we said in the last episode, the end of season 1, is that she is just so rudderless as a character because she's just got nothing to drive her.
Yeah. And it also affects everyone else around her because they all have to protect her. They have to show some sort of parental safety towards her, essentially, don't they?
Basically,
parental protection.
Writing Susan into Doctor Who is the equivalent of writing a story with 3 characters who have to move through an entire story whilst looking after an egg.
Yeah.
They're playing an egg and spoon race, and the spoon is the script, and the egg is Susan.
Can I just say, I'm really sorry about how this episode is essentially just us complaining.
It's not like there are some good things about it. It's nice to see everyone, and
yeah.
I think that Ian has a quite nice episode again. He's still good. He's still my favourite.
Yeah.
There's that. Although Barbara, yeah, this was a bit of levity from the complaining. I'm going to go straight back in. Barbara. There is a thing that happens in the second episode of this serial where Barbara and Ian come across some wheat seeds. And they've been covered in DN6, so a very powerful, it will kill pretty much anything pesticide. Barbara touches it without knowing this. When Ian says, it's probably covered in the pesticide, instead of Barbara going, oh God, Ian, I've actually touched that, Barbara decides for no discernible reason to keep it to herself.
I never understand why in dramas and books and all of these things, when a character does something like this and they just don't say. Other than to keep the plot moving.
Yeah, there is no reason. All right, let me try this. Listeners, hello. if you had touched a poisonous substance or a corrosive substance by mistake, and you had someone there who was a science teacher, by the way, so knows about these things, could help you, would you A, ask him for that help, or B, I'll soldier it out. If I die, I die.
Yeah.
And it's not like, she does it for a couple of minutes and then realises there's a problem. This goes on for an entire serial, even though she's obviously in a bad way.
It's essentially from when she touches it to when she initially faints, and even then they have to work it out themselves.
Yeah, it's genuinely insane. I don't understand why Barbara, as a character, let alone just for the plot, as a character, wouldn't say that. It's not in her character. It's not in a human character. It's literally just a device to keep intrigue in the plot and to have viewers go, oh no, Barbara might die. Well, it's like, well, actually, wouldn't it have been easier to have Barbara touch it and then everybody know about it and then maybe make the cure quite hard to get and have the story be them go and find the cure, which is much better and is much more positive.
And on the topic of the cure, I'm still not entirely 100% sure how they cured it.
It's, as far as I can tell, it's pretty much wash your hands off with water. Because that's seemingly how the humans are all right. Sorry, not humans. Everyone in the story is a human, apart from the two Time Lords. The big humans.
So what my initial thought was the Doctor was grabbing this... Because at the end, he grabs a seed and then takes it in for Tardis. I initially thought he was going to get some substance off the outside of the shell of the seed and then work out a way to reverse engineer it.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
That's what I thought was going to happen. But no, he just brought it along just to prove the fact which they had shrunk. They had grown up again, even.
It's like this story was written lazy. It's been written lazy. And these decisions that characters made just take you so out of it. Like, I was spending that entire third serial just going, for God's sake, tell them. Like, what have you got to gain from it? Pride?
Yeah.
Like, it's not even like it's not obvious. Like, she spends that entire episode like weak and flailing her limbs about and pale and obviously messed up. But the other characters are just like, oh, Barbara must just be a little dehydrated. She hasn't had food. So, oh, what are we doing?
Yeah. However, this episode, though, I think it's Game for Daleks, where you can argue there was there were undertones to it. It was definitely political in some way. This one has the first overtly political one against insecticides.
Yeah, basically arguing that insecticides are a great big massive problem. Although I don't think it really does that either, because it basically says DN6 is super, super powerful.
Yeah.
But and so it basically says, well, insecticides of a normal power are fine, just don't make a really powerful one. So it doesn't really go down either way. It doesn't really make a statement about it. It just says, well, if there's a more powerful insecticide, that might be a bad idea.
So I've got a question for you.
Go ahead.
If you had to pick out 2 episodes, 2 stories to watch, Planet of Giants and Edge of Destruction, which one would you choose?
Out of these 2?
Yes.
Planet of Giants has more to it in the sense there's just more stuff happening visually. But on the flip side, if I'm being really clever about this, Edge is only 2 episodes, so it would be over quicker.
I also feel like Edge of Destruction, while largely completely nonsensical and making no sense...
Yeah, which is a problem.
It's got more story to it.
It's got more logical story to it, because at least with Edge, there's like one story that's running throughout, or they're trying to.
It's got more course and effect, because this one has got course, but then no effect.
The only cause and effect is in the 3rd episode when the Doctor and the team figure out how to set fire to the gas from the tap to cause a fire to explode the insecticide.
But even that, I'd argue, would have no change in the story, other than the fact which there wouldn't be an explosion for police to just come in and go, oi, put that down.
Yeah, the police would come in and see a man about to shoot a man, because that's the situation. Forrester has got Smithers' back on his sink, back to the wall with a gun at his head. So it wouldn't have changed absolutely anything. And then the ending of this story, because they're all still small, they've got to get what? They've got to climb back down a sink, return to the TARDIS, and figure out how to get big again. Owen, how do they resolve all of those key, crucial, dramatic questions?
Not even with a speech, they just decide they can solve it.
Yes, they smash cut to when it's all done.
We don't even have a pointless speech about a button.
Don't even remind me of the button speak. Yeah, I would have honestly preferred that. At least they would have tried. This is just... It's like their endings are getting worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was... To cap this off in the most level-headed way that I can, burn this episode with fire.
And also, why did they decide to open the series with this?
Now, obviously, back then, the breaks between the series were so small that it didn't really... It was more just a production moniker than a series, but even so...
It was like a month and a half.
Yeah, they'd waited 6 weeks. They'd had like a summer holiday, effectively.
Yeah.
And come back with just a very, very poor story. There's 2 stories that aren't very good, that don't connect up at all, so you're not sure... Because you spend the whole time, when you see 2 parallel stories, as a viewer, you're trained to try and see the links and the patterns, because you obviously want to know that they're connected, and when they don't, you end up being so disappointed, because you're like, well, why did I have to watch both of them?
As I said, if this was a middle episode, I would say this is just fine, mindless filler. But it's not, it's the first episode in the season. So it just feels a bit dead.
Let's be honest, don't it?
It's not even... I wouldn't even go that far. It's just dull. There's nothing strong. There's nothing good about it. There's nothing overly bad about it. Nothing ever happens.
I say nothing overly bad, but like that Barbara thing is bad. The fact they're not connecting the stories together is bad. The fact that there's not really much happening is bad.
But that's as a story writer perspective. Just as a standard viewer, just nothing happens.
Yeah, dull from that perspective.
Nothing happens. The only thing which I could argue they caused to happen in this entire story was maybe because they realised about the phone. That's the only effect I could potentially see this happening. And that is so small, it's barely given any mention.
I think the whole episode was like, oh, what if we made them small? Which is like a fine setup, and then they just didn't know how to keep going.
You know those ideas you have, when you go... I imagine you have these as a writer all the time. You go, oh, this would be a fun little idea for us to have. Let's have the character do this. And then as soon as you start thinking, what's the middle of this story going to be? What's the end of this story going to be? You realise, no, wait, that's just a gimmick. It feels like they just had that initial, oh, let's do this. And they just didn't think through that, the middle and the end bit.
When I come up with ideas, if I don't think of an ending straight away for that idea, like a logical conclusion where characters would end up or where the themes would go, that kind of thing, then it's not worth developing, because if it doesn't reach a logical conclusion, if it's just like a thought or a sketch, it's not worth telling into like a full-blown story. It has to have a wholeness. It has to have a beginning and end, and the middle is less important. But you need to be able to work back from the end to the beginning and work out where those links are to take your characters on the journey you want to take them on. Like they're on a train and you need, like they're at one end of London and you need to get them to the other end of London. And you need to tell them what tubes to get on. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you need to know where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, you're just sending people into the tube network unattended, which is frankly criminal.
Yeah. Using your train metaphor, it's like saying, a train is on fire, but people have to get out. Okay, now what else is going on? You can't carry an entire series of that.
Yeah, it's not a whole series. It's like, okay, you might be able to do the aftermath of the train if there's trauma from it, or if people they know have died and things like that. Do like the leftovers. But
even then...
You'd be clutching at straws.
Yeah. So anyway, apologies about this episode being me complaining about an audiobook and then us complaining about this episode.
It's the positivity train on season 2. Tune in next week for me to read my journal entries. So
every episode we sit through and plot all the main points we want to talk about.
Yeah.
In a document. This is the plot points on our document.
Go ahead.
The chemical is called DN6. Episode 1, Planet of Giants. Episode 2, Dangerous Journeys. Episode 3, Round Up. So I suppose we've done all of that, so let's round up.
Let's round up, shall we? My word. So, Owen, what are your overall thoughts on the Planet of Giants serial?
Dull.
Dull. Should I do a one-word answer as well?
Yeah.
Forgotten.
Yeah. So, let's end how we normally do. Out of 10.
Okay. I would like to forget this one, and if it doesn't turn up at the back end of the series, right at the bottom, this would have been a bad series. It's a 2.
So, this is worse than Edge of Destruction. Because you gave Edge of Destruction number 3.
Yeah, this is probably worse.
I'm going to give it a 2 as well.
You're going to give it 2 as well. So we agree that this one is a shocker.
It's a shocker in the first episode of the season. Like, at least Edge of Destruction was in the middle.
Yeah, and it was like a bottle episode, and we knew kind of it was going to be a bit loose. This, just a complete misfire. Bad story. Characters don't do anything interesting. Dull for viewers. Annoying for writers. Can't think of much good to say about it. Disappointing start. But
I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. So yeah, anyway. So next episode.
Next episode, though, might be positive because it's a great big 6-episode Dalek serial.
It's the one which we preluded in our last episode because I completely screwed up the episode ordering.
Which is standard for us, so don't worry about it. 6 parts, Daleks. Started well, the most iconic Doctor Who villains.
So it's the Dalek invasion of Earth, which I'm going to say is perhaps one of the most iconic episodes of Doctor Who.
Yeah, it's if you're even a casual fan, you know about this episode.
If you don't know about it, you've seen shots from it. It's probably the most notorious episode you've never watched.
I can actually picture the shots right now. Like in my head, they are ingrained.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll be more impressed by that one.
Well, yeah, you'd hope so. If that's bad, then good lord. Rescue this show.
This is going to be a fun season of this podcast, isn't it? It's just going to be us two complaining.
Well, if you'd like to hear us complain some more about Doctor Who, a show that we claim to love, then you can follow us wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, whether that's Apple Podcast, hello everyone, and whether that's all the other services we're on, because we're on quite a few now, aren't we? So, pretty much wherever you get your podcasts, we're there, and you can follow us there, and if you'd like to get in with us about anything we've said, if you'd like to complain about us complaining in a kind of inception, then why not? Twitter account @BlackArchivePod or email us blackarchivepod@gmail.com.
So hopefully we'll be in a better mood next week. So see you then.
Daleks always put me in a good mood. Till then, goodbye.
Exterminate.
Why do I do this to myself? Why do I do this to myself? Congratulations, you've made it to the end of time. Well, just this episode, really. It's not that dramatic. But thanks very much for getting here. If you've liked what you heard, you can get in touch with us on Twitter @BlackArchivePod or via email blackarchivepod@gmail.com. And, of course, remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.